23-year-old Jade Martinez stared at her empty keychain, the familiar weight of her Honda Civic keys conspicuously absent. Outside her bedroom window, the driveway sat empty except for oil stains marking where her car should have been. Her phone buzzed with a text from her older brother Dylan. "Borrowed your car for the weekend. Emergency. You'll understand." The job interview that could change everything was in exactly 47 minutes, and she was stranded in suburban Phoenix with no transportation, no backup plan, and a sinking realization that her dreams might be slipping away because of family betrayal she never saw coming.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jade Martinez had perfected the art of making herself invisible in her own home. At 23, she moved through the two-story house in Glendale, Arizona like a ghost, tiptoeing past her mother's closed bedroom door, where Carmen Martinez spent most afternoons recovering from her overnight shifts at the casino. She avoided the living room where her 27-year-old brother Dylan commandeered the couch, surrounded by energy drink cans and gaming controllers, loudly streaming his latest Call of Duty sessions to his modest but devoted online following. The kitchen became her sanctuary during the early morning hours. By 5:30 a.m., she'd already be dressed in her server uniform, black slacks, white button-down shirt, and the slightly scuffed black shoes she'd been meaning to replace for months. She'd brew coffee quietly, pack her lunch, and leave a note for her mother about grocery needs or utility bills that needed attention. By 6:15, she'd be backing her silver Honda Civic out of the driveway, heading to Sunrise Diner, where she'd been working the breakfast and lunch shifts for the past 2 years. Jade had become an expert at the delicate dance of survival. Her server wages, supplemented by tips that ranged from generous to insulting, depending on the day, barely covered her car payment, insurance, and her contribution to household expenses. She'd mastered the skill of stretching every dollar, shopping clearance racks and using coupons her coworkers often forgot. Her bedroom, a small space she'd claimed in the converted garage, reflected this careful economy. Second-hand furniture arranged thoughtfully, string lights providing warm ambience instead of expensive lamps, and a small desk where she spent her evenings hunched over her laptop. That laptop held her real dreams. Every night after her shifts, often still smelling faintly of coffee and bacon grease, Jade would open her graphic design portfolio. Self-taught through YouTube tutorials and free online courses, she'd been building her skills one project at a time. She designed flyers for local businesses, created social media graphics for friends' small ventures, and worked on personal projects that showcased her growing abilities. Her portfolio folder contained dozens of designs, logos that would never see business cards, website mock-ups for companies that didn't exist, and brand identities born from her imagination. The morning routine had become her meditation. She'd drive through the quiet Phoenix streets, watching the desert sunrise paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold, dreaming about the day when she wouldn't need to smell like syrup and French fries to pay her bills. She'd imagine walking into a real design agency, sitting at a proper desk with dual monitors and a graphics tablet, collaborating with teams on campaigns that mattered. At Sunrise Diner, Jade had earned a reputation as the reliable one. She picked up extra shifts when coworkers called in sick, stayed late when the dinner rush ran long, and never complained about difficult customers. Her manager, Rita, a 50-something woman who'd been running diners since Jade was born, often praised her work ethic. "You've got something special, mija," she'd say, using the Spanish endearment that reminded her of her grandmother. "You're not going to be slinging hash forever." But forever felt increasingly likely as months stretched into years. She watched younger employees come and go, high school students saving for prom dresses, college kids earning beer money, retirees looking for something to fill their days. She remained constant, reliable, trapped in a routine that paid the bills but slowly eroded her confidence in ever escaping it. Her family situation complicated every aspect of her ambition. Carmen Martinez worked as a cocktail server at Desert Diamond Casino, pulling overnight shifts that left her exhausted during the day and irritable during the few hours they overlapped. She'd divorced her father when Jade was 15, and the settlement had covered the down payment on their current house, a modest 3-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood where automatic sprinklers fought a losing battle against the desert heat. Dylan presented a more complex challenge. After dropping out of college during his sophomore year, he'd moved back home with grand plans of becoming a professional gamer and content creator. His Twitch streaming generated modest income, enough to contribute sporadically to household expenses, but not enough to live independently. He treated the house like his personal gaming headquarters, occupying the living room with his elaborate computer setup, multiple monitors, and professional-grade microphone equipment. The dynamic had settled into an uneasy routine. Carmen worked nights and slept days. Dylan streamed in the evenings and slept until noon. Jade worked mornings and designed at night, stealing quiet hours when the house finally settled into peace. She'd learned to navigate around Dylan's equipment, step quietly past her mother's room, and make herself scarce when family tensions inevitably erupted.
Money conversations happened in whispers and worried glances. The mortgage payment arrived like clockwork each month, accompanied by utilities, insurance, and the countless small expenses that kept their household functioning. Carmen's casino income covered the major bills, Dylan contributed irregularly, and Jade's diner wages filled the gaps while funding her own expenses. She'd applied to several design positions over the past year, submitting her portfolio with carefully crafted cover letters that emphasized her self-taught skills and passionate dedication. Most applications disappeared into digital voids, generating automatic rejection emails weeks later. A few resulted in interviews that seemed promising, but ultimately ended with, "We're looking for someone with more formal experience," or "We'll keep your resume on file." Each rejection stung differently. Some felt like gentle dismissals of her amateur status. Others felt like indictments of her background, her lack of formal education, her desperation that probably showed through her carefully rehearsed confidence. She'd return to the diner after these interviews, tying her apron with slightly less hope than before, serving coffee to customers who saw her as just another waitress, with no dreams worth knowing. The isolation grew heavier with each passing month. Her high school friends had scattered, some to universities, others to marriages and babies, a few to cities that offered better opportunities than Phoenix's sprawling suburbs. Social media became a carefully curated highlight reel of their progress, while Jade's life remained essentially unchanged. She'd stopped posting regularly, tired of manufacturing enthusiasm for her circumstances. Her car represented freedom and possibility in ways that transcended its modest Blue Book value. The Honda Civic, purchased used with her tax refund and a small loan 2 years earlier, gave her independence from family chaos and access to opportunities beyond walking distance. She maintained it carefully, keeping up with oil changes and minor repairs, treating it as the valuable asset it represented in her carefully balanced life. Late at night, when the house finally quieted and her design work was finished, Jade would sometimes sit in her car in the driveway, air conditioning running, just thinking. She'd watch other houses on their street, wondering about the lives unfolding behind those windows. Did other families navigate the same complex dance of shared resources and individual dreams? Did other 23-year-olds feel suspended between adolescent dependence and adult independence, contributing to household stability while yearning for personal escape? The desert sky, unpolluted by city lights in our neighborhood, offered countless stars and infinite possibility. Jade would make plans during these quiet moments, applications she'd submit, skills she'd learn, changes she'd implement. Tomorrow would be different, she'd tell herself. Tomorrow she'd take another step toward the life she'd been designing in her imagination. But tomorrow always brought another shift at Sunrise Diner, another day of the same careful routine, another evening of family dynamics that required her constant adaptation. The ordinary world of Jade Martinez had become a precisely balanced ecosystem of responsibility, aspiration, and quiet desperation. A life that worked just well enough to continue, but not well enough to satisfy the dreams that kept her awake long after her mother's casino shift began and Dylan's streaming session finally ended.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, while Jade was rushing to get ready for her opening shift at Sunrise Diner. Her phone chimed with the notification just as she was grabbing her keys from the small dish by her bedroom door. She almost ignored it. Most emails at 6:15 a.m. were either spam or automated reminders from apps she'd forgotten to uninstall. But something about the sender's name made her pause. Creative Edge Digital, Talent Acquisition. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the message, leaning against her bedroom doorframe in the converted garage space she called home. The email was brief but electrifying. They wanted to interview her for a junior graphic designer position. They'd reviewed her portfolio submission from 3 weeks earlier and were impressed with her innovative approach and natural talent. The position offered full benefits, professional development opportunities, and a starting salary that was nearly double what she made at the diner. The interview was scheduled for Friday morning at 11 a.m., exactly 3 days away. Jade read the email 4 times, each reading making the opportunity feel more real and more terrifying. Creative Edge Digital wasn't some small startup or fly-by-night operation. They were a legitimate agency with Fortune 500 clients, the kind of place she'd only dreamed of working at. Their offices were in Scottsdale, about 45 minutes from her house, depending on traffic. She screenshotted the email and immediately started planning. Friday was normally one of her heaviest shifts, the diner's weekly rush when local construction workers got paid and families celebrated the approaching weekend. But Rita owed her several favors for covering shifts when other employees had emergencies. She could make this work. The next 3 days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. Jade spent her tip money on a professional blazer from a consignment shop in Tempe, finding a navy blue piece that fit perfectly and looked expensive despite its $25 price tag. She practiced interview questions while serving customers, rehearsing answers about her design philosophy and career goals during quiet moments between orders. Wednesday evening, she updated her portfolio, adding 2 recent projects and refining the presentation of her best work. She researched Creative Edge Digital extensively, memorizing the names of their key clients and recent campaigns. She even drove by their office building on Thursday after her shift, timing the route and locating parking to eliminate any variables that might make her late. Thursday night, sleep eluded her completely. Jade lay in her narrow bed, staring at the string lights that decorated her ceiling, visualizing the interview. She imagined walking into a real design office, meeting professionals who understood her passion, discussing projects that mattered beyond daily lunch specials and weekend promotions. The possibility felt simultaneously within reach and impossibly distant. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear, one of those perfect Arizona days when the desert air carried hints of sage and possibility. Jade woke at 5:30 a.m., giving herself extra time to prepare. She showered carefully, styled her hair into a sleek professional bun, and applied makeup with the precision she usually reserved for special occasions. The navy blazer transformed her appearance, making her look older, more serious, more like someone who belonged in a corporate environment. She'd planned every detail meticulously, leave the house by 9:45 a.m. to account for traffic and arrive 15 minutes early, stop for coffee nearby to calm her nerves, review her portfolio one final time in the parking lot, walk into Creative Edge Digital at exactly 11:59 a.m., confident and prepared. At 9:30 a.m., Jade grabbed her portfolio bag and headed to the kitchen counter where she always left her car keys. The small ceramic dish was empty. Panic started simply as confusion. She checked her pockets, her bedroom, the bathroom counter. Maybe she'd absent-mindedly moved them somewhere else. But as minutes ticked by and her search became increasingly frantic, a horrible realization began forming. She walked to the front window and looked out at the driveway. Her Honda Civic was gone. "Dylan!" she called out, rushing toward his bedroom. No response. She knocked harder, then pushed open his door to find his bed was empty, unmed, with clothes scattered across the floor. His gaming setup in the living room sat silent, monitors dark. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her brother. "Borrowed your car for the weekend. Emergency. You'll understand. Sorry, sis." Jade stared at the message, reading it over and over as the implications crashed over her like a physical blow. The most important interview of her life was in exactly 78 minutes, and she was stranded, without transportation.
She called Dylan immediately. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She tried again and again. Each unanswered call felt like another door slamming shut on her future. "Dylan, you need to call me back right now," she said after the beep, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I have a job interview this morning. I need my car back immediately." She paced the kitchen, mind racing through possibilities. Uber would be expensive, but doable, except her phone showed no available drivers in their area, and the estimated wait time was 45 minutes. The bus system didn't run direct routes to Scottsdale, requiring multiple transfers that would take over 2 hours. Her mother was at work, unreachable during her casino shift. Another text from Dylan arrived. "Can't answer right now. We'll explain later. Promise I'll make this up to you." Jade screamed in frustration, the sound echoing through the empty house. She'd never felt such pure, concentrated rage. Every sacrifice, every extra shift, every careful dollar saved to maintain that car, all to give her exactly this kind of opportunity. And Dylan had casually stolen it for some undefined emergency that he couldn't even explain. She called Creative Edge Digital, her hands shaking as she dialed. "This is Rebecca in HR. Hi, this is Jade Martinez. I have an interview scheduled for 11 o'clock this morning, and I'm having a family emergency. Would it be possible to reschedule?" The pause felt eternal. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Jade. Unfortunately, our hiring manager is only available today and Monday, and we're hoping to make a decision by early next week. We have other candidates interviewing this afternoon." "Monday would be perfect," Jade said quickly. "I can be there anytime Monday." "Let me check. Actually, Monday is completely booked with client meetings. I'm really sorry, but we'd need to move forward with today's schedule." Jade closed her eyes, fighting back tears. "I understand. Thank you for your time." She hung up and sank onto the kitchen floor, her carefully planned outfit suddenly feeling like a costume for a play that had been canceled. The blazer that had made her feel professional now felt like mockery. Her portfolio bag sat by the door, filled with work that would never be seen by the people who mattered. The house felt different now, not like the sanctuary she'd learned to navigate, but like a trap. The silence pressed against her ears. Dylan's empty energy drink cans on the coffee table seemed to mock her crisis. Her mother's closed bedroom door represented another person who couldn't help her, wouldn't even know what had happened until hours later. Jade picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts, looking for anyone who might have a car available on short notice. Her high school friends were all at work or lived too far away. Her coworkers at the diner either didn't have reliable transportation themselves or were covering the Friday morning rush she was supposed to be working. The reality settled over her like a heavy blanket. The opportunity was gone. Creative Edge Digital would hire someone else, someone whose family didn't sabotage their chances. The junior designer position would go to a person who had reliable transportation and family members who respected their dreams. She called in sick to the diner, something she'd never done for anything less than genuine illness. Rita sounded surprised and concerned, offering to cover her shift personally. The kindness in her manager's voice only made everything worse. For the first time in months, Jade had nowhere to be, no shift to work, no interview to attend, no routine to follow. She sat in the kitchen, still wearing her interview outfit, watching the clock tick past 11 a.m. Right now, she should have been shaking hands with the hiring manager, discussing her portfolio, selling herself as the perfect candidate for her dream job. Instead, she was stranded in her family's kitchen, surrounded by the ordinary objects of her ordinary life, watching her extraordinary opportunity disappear because her brother had decided his needs were more important than hers. The worst part wasn't just the missed interview. It was the realization that her carefully constructed life, balanced on shared resources and family cooperation, could be destroyed so easily by someone else's thoughtless decision. All her planning, saving, and dreaming meant nothing if she couldn't rely on the basic infrastructure of her existence. Dylan's casual theft had revealed a truth she'd been avoiding. She wasn't independent at all. Dylan returned home at 3:47 p.m. on Saturday, nearly 30 hours after stealing Jade's car and destroying her future. She heard the familiar sound of her Honda Civic pulling into the driveway and felt her stomach clench with a mixture of relief and fury she'd never experienced before. For over a day, she'd been trapped in the house, cycling between rage, despair, and a growing sense of helplessness that felt like drowning in slow motion. She'd spent Friday evening pacing the living room, rehearsing confrontations that ranged from reasoned arguments to screaming matches. She'd imagined throwing Dylan's gaming equipment into the street, changing the locks, demanding he move out immediately. But as the hours passed and her anger cooled into something harder and more bitter, she realized that every fantasy of revenge only highlighted her own powerlessness. When Dylan walked through the front door, car keys dangling casually from his finger, Jade was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, pretending to work on a design project. She'd changed out of her interview clothes hours earlier, but the blazer still hung on her bedroom door like a monument to missed opportunities. "Hey, sorry about yesterday," Dylan said, tossing her keys onto the counter with the same casual gesture he might use to discard a candy wrapper. "Emergency came up. I'll explain everything." Jade looked up from her screen, studying her brother's face for signs of genuine remorse or acknowledgement of what he'd cost her. Dylan looked tired, but not particularly troubled. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair messy, but he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who expected forgiveness simply because he'd asked for it. "I had a job interview yesterday morning," Jade said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. "The most important interview of my life. I missed it because you took my car." Dylan paused in his journey toward the refrigerator, finally seeming to register the gravity in her tone. "Oh, shit, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me you had something important?" "Why didn't I tell you?" "Dylan, it's my car. I shouldn't need to provide you with a schedule of my life before you steal my transportation." "I didn't steal anything," he said, grabbing an energy drink and cracking it open. "I borrowed it. There's a difference. And it really was an emergency." "What emergency?" Jade demanded, closing her laptop and giving him her full attention. "What was so important that you couldn't ask, couldn't wait, couldn't find literally any other solution?" Dylan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her eyes. "Sarah's car broke down in Tucson. She was stuck at her ex's place and needed a ride home. I couldn't just leave her there." Jade stared at him, processing this information. Sarah Chen was Dylan's on and off girlfriend and aspiring influencer who treated their relationship like content for her social media platforms. They'd broken up 6 weeks earlier after a dramatic fight that had involved Sarah throwing Dylan's clothes onto the front lawn while screaming about his complete lack of ambition. "Sarah," Jade repeated slowly, "the girl who dumped you last month? The girl who told your entire stream chat that you were a parasitic man-child living in his mommy's house." "It's complicated," Dylan muttered. "We're working things out." "So you took my car, without asking, to rescue your ex-girlfriend from Tucson and in the process destroyed my chance on a career-changing job interview?" Jade's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Did I understand that correctly?" "Look, I said I was sorry. I'll make it up to you somehow." "How?" The question exploded out of her with more force than she had intended. "How exactly do you make up for costing someone their dream job? Do you have another interview with Creative Edge Digital in your back pocket? Can you magically give me back the 3 days I spent preparing, the money I spent on professional clothes, the 2 years I've been building toward exactly this kind of opportunity?" Dylan flinched at her tone, setting down his drink. "You're being dramatic. It's just one interview. There will be other jobs." "Just one interview," Jade laughed, but the sound contained no humor. "Do you have any idea how many applications I've submitted in the past year? How many rejections I've received? How rare it is for someone like me to even get called for an interview at a legitimate agency?" "Someone like you?" "Someone without a college degree, someone without professional experience, someone whose portfolio is entirely self-taught work done in a converted garage bedroom." Her voice cracked slightly. "Someone whose own family doesn't think her dreams are worth protecting." The accusation hung in the air between them. Dylan looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time since walking through the door, but his discomfort quickly transformed into defensiveness. "That's not fair," he said. I support your design stuff. I share your posts sometimes. I tell people you're talented. You share my posts? Jade stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the kitchen floor. You think liking my Instagram posts is the same as supporting my career? You took my only means of transportation on the most important day of my professional life to chase after a girl who publicly humiliated you. And you think we're even because you occasionally click a heart emoji? Sarah and I have history. And I have a future, Jade shouted, her careful composure finally cracking. Or I had one until you decided your relationship drama was more important than my entire career. Dylan stepped backward, genuinely startled by her outburst. In 23 years, he'd rarely seen his younger sister lose control. Jade was the steady one, the responsible one, the family member who absorbed problems rather than creating them. I didn't know, he said weakly. If you'd told me. I shouldn't have to tell you. Tears were flowing now, hot and angry. I shouldn't have to ask permission to use my own car for my own life. I shouldn't have to protect my dreams from my own family. The sound of their raised voices had awakened Carmen, who emerged from her bedroom in the robe and slippers she wore between shifts. She looked exhausted and confused, squinting in the afternoon light filtering through the kitchen windows. What's all the shouting about? She asked, her voice hoarse from sleep and cigarettes. Dylan took my car yesterday without asking. I missed a job interview because of it. Carmen looked between her children, trying to process the conflict through her post-sleep haze. You took Jade's car? It was an emergency, Dylan said, but his defensiveness sounded hollow, even to himself. What kind of emergency? When Dylan explained about Sarah's situation in Tucson, Carmen's expression shifted from confusion to disappointment. Mijo, you can't just take other people's things, even family, especially when it affects their work. It was just one interview, Dylan muttered. Just one interview could change everything for Jade. You know how hard she's been working, Carmen said firmly. But even as her mother defended her, Jade felt the familiar weight of family dynamics settling back into place. Carmen would scold Dylan, Dylan would apologize more convincingly, and everyone would expect her to forgive and move forward. The house would return to its careful balance, and her destroyed opportunity would become just another family story, another example of the Martinez family's ability to survive their own chaos. That evening, alone in her converted garage bedroom, Jade sat on her narrow bed and confronted the depth of her powerlessness. The job interview was gone, irretrievably lost. Creative Edge Digital had probably hired someone else by now, someone whose family supported their ambitions instead of sabotaging them. The missed opportunity revealed something even more devastating, the fundamental fragility of her entire situation. She'd built her life on shared resources and family cooperation, but she had no control over either. Her car could be taken at any moment for someone else's priorities. Her savings could be needed for family emergencies. Her dreams were always subordinate to other people's immediate needs. She opened her laptop and scrolled through job boards, but every posting seemed to require experience she didn't have or connections she couldn't make. The legitimate opportunities were rare, competitive, and demanded exactly the kind of professional presentation she'd prepared for Creative Edge Digital. Without a car she could rely on, even finding interviews would be challenging. Without family support, building the kind of portfolio that might impress employers seemed impossible. The doubt crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. Maybe Dylan was right. Maybe she was being dramatic. Maybe one missed interview didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Maybe her dreams of becoming a professional designer were just elaborate fantasies, ways to distract herself from the reality that some people were meant to serve coffee and take orders and never progress beyond their circumstances. She looked around her small bedroom, the secondhand furniture, the string lights, the carefully organized craft supplies she used for her design work. Everything looked different now, smaller and more pathetic. Instead of seeing a creative sanctuary, she saw a young woman playing dress-up with professional aspirations she was never qualified to pursue. The worst part wasn't even Dylan's betrayal or her own family's casual dismissal of her dreams. The worst part was the growing suspicion that maybe they were right to dismiss them.
3 weeks after the missed interview, Jade found herself standing in the employee bathroom at Sunrise Diner, staring at her reflection in the scratched mirror above the sink. Her name tag sat slightly crooked on her uniform shirt, and there was a small coffee stain on her apron that she hadn't noticed until now. She looked exactly like what she was, a 23-year-old waitress with no prospects and diminishing hope. The morning had been particularly brutal. A table of construction workers had left a $2 tip on a $40 check, laughing about teaching the help some respect. An elderly woman had complained that her scrambled eggs were too scrambled and demanded a full refund. A businessman in an expensive suit had snapped his fingers at her like she was a dog, then acted personally offended when she took 30 seconds to refill his coffee cup. But the breaking point had come when Rita pulled her aside during the lunch lull. Her manager's face carried the careful expression of someone delivering news they'd been dreading to share. "Jade, honey, we need to talk," Rita had said, leading her to the small office behind the kitchen. "Corporate is making some changes. They're cutting hours across all locations, and I have to reduce everyone's shifts by at least 20%. The math was simple and devastating. Jade's already tight budget couldn't absorb a 20% reduction in income. She was barely meeting her car payment, insurance, and household contributions as it was. 20% less meant choosing between groceries and gas, between her phone bill and her car insurance. "I know this is hard," Rita continued. "If it were up to me, I'd keep everyone at full hours. You know how much I value your work. But my hands are tied." Now, standing in the bathroom mirror, Jade felt the walls of her life closing in from every direction. The missed Creative Edge interview had been just the beginning. In the 3 weeks since, she'd applied to 17 other design positions and received 3 rejection emails and 14 silences. Her portfolio, which had once felt like a ticket to a better future, now seemed like a collection of amateur attempts at professional work. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. "Can you pick up some groceries on your way home? Mom's working double shifts all week and I'm streaming until late." The casual assumption that she would handle family errands on her reduced income and shortened schedule felt like the final insult. She typed and deleted several responses, each more angry than the last, before finally putting her phone away without replying. When her shift ended at 3 p.m., Jade sat in her Honda Civic in the diner parking lot, engine running, but going nowhere. The afternoon heat was building, and her air conditioning struggled against the Arizona sun. She had 4 hours before her evening design clients expected their projects completed, small jobs that paid $30 to $50 each and barely covered her gas money. But instead of driving home to her converted garage bedroom and her secondhand laptop, Jade found herself driving toward downtown Phoenix. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she saw it. A small storefront with West Side Community College Continuing Education painted in faded letters across the window. She'd driven past this building dozens of times without really seeing it. Now she parked across the street and studied the modest campus. Students of all ages walked between buildings, carrying portfolios and laptops, looking purposeful in ways that made her chest ache with longing. Jade walked through the front doors and found herself in a small lobby with inspirational posters and bulletin boards covered in program announcements. A middle-aged Latino woman at the reception desk looked up with a warm smile. "Can I help you with something, honey?" "I'm interested in, maybe I could get some information about your graphic design program." The woman, whose nameplate read Maria Santos, Student Services, brightened immediately. "Of course. Are you looking to start a certificate program or transfer to a 4-year school?" "I don't know," Jade admitted. "I've been teaching myself design for a couple years, but I don't have any formal education.
I work full-time, so I'd need something part-time or evening classes. Maria pulled out a glossy brochure and spread it across the counter. Our Applied Arts Certificate is perfect for working students. Classes meet Tuesday and Thursday evenings, plus one Saturday morning session per month. The whole program takes 18 months, and it's designed specifically for people who want to build professional portfolios. Jade studied the course listings: typography and layout, digital illustration, brand identity design, portfolio development. Each class title felt like a door opening in her mind. These weren't YouTube tutorials or self-guided experiments. These were real courses taught by professionals with structured curricula and actual credentials at the end. "What about cost?" she asked, although she was afraid to hear the answer. "The full program is $6,800, but we have payment plans and financial aid. Many students qualify for grants that cover up to 60% of tuition." $6,800. Even with financial aid covering most of it, Jade would need to find at least $2,000 she didn't have, plus maintain her current income while attending classes. The math seemed impossible.
But as Maria showed her through the small design lab, 12 workstations with professional software and high-end monitors, something stirred in Jade's chest that she hadn't felt since the morning of her missed interview. This was real. This was a path forward that didn't depend on family cooperation or lucky breaks or perfect timing. "Would it be possible to sit in on a class?" Jade asked. "Just to see if it's really what I want to do?" "Absolutely. There's an intro class tonight at 7. Professor Chen welcomes visitors." That evening, Jade sat in the back row of Introduction to Digital Design, watching 20 students work through exercises in Adobe Illustrator. Some were her age, others were middle-aged career changers, a few were retirees pursuing long-delayed passions. The instructor, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s, moved between workstations, offering individual guidance with infinite patience. "Design isn't about talent," Professor Chen said during her opening lecture. "It's about learning to see problems clearly and developing the technical skills to solve them elegantly. Anyone can learn these skills with dedication and practice." The words felt like a direct challenge to every doubt that had been growing in Jade's mind since Dylan took her car keys and destroyed her interview opportunity. Maybe her dreams weren't fantasies. Maybe she wasn't fooling herself about her abilities. Maybe she just needed better tools and proper guidance. During the break, a woman named Ashley struck up a conversation. She was 28, recently divorced, with 2 young children at home. "I've been wanting to do this for years," Ashley said. "Finally decided I couldn't wait for the perfect time because there wasn't going to be one." Another student, James, overheard their conversation. "I'm 52, he said with a grin. "If I can learn Photoshop, anyone can. My teenage daughter has to help me with my iPhone, but somehow I'm getting A's in digital illustration." Driving home after the class, Jade felt something shifting inside her chest. For 3 weeks, she'd been spiraling into despair and self-doubt, letting Dylan's thoughtless action define the limits of her possibilities. But sitting in that classroom, watching people of all ages and backgrounds work toward the same goal she had been pursuing alone, she realized that her path forward didn't have to depend on anyone else's choices. She could continue waiting for perfect opportunities that might never come, or she could create her own opportunities through education and skill development. She could keep letting family dynamics control her future, or she could build independence through knowledge that no one could take away from her. The decision crystallized as she pulled into her driveway and saw Dylan's streaming setup glowing through the living room window. For too long, she had been trying to build a professional life while remaining trapped in family patterns that treated her dreams as secondary to everyone else's immediate needs. The community college program offered something different, a structured path that she could control, progress that she could measure, and credentials that would be hers regardless of who borrowed her car or dismissed her ambitions. That night, she filled out the financial aid application, calculated and recalculated the costs, and researched every grant and scholarship available to working students. The numbers were challenging, but not impossible. She would need to pick up extra shifts, sell some belongings, and live even more frugally than she already did. She would need to study after long days at the diner and sacrifice what little free time she currently had. But for the first time since Dylan had casually stolen her car keys and destroyed her interview opportunity, Jade felt like she was moving towards something instead of just surviving each day. The path wouldn't be easy, but it would be entirely her own. She was done waiting for other people to respect her dreams. She was ready to invest in them herself.
Jade's acceptance letter from Westside Community College arrived on a Thursday morning in early October, tucked between a utility bill and a credit card offer. Her hands shook slightly as she opened the envelope in the kitchen, still wearing her Sunrise Diner uniform from the opening shift. The letter was brief but life-changing. She'd been accepted into the Applied Arts Certificate program with a financial aid package that covered 70% of her tuition. The math she'd obsessed over for weeks suddenly became manageable. Instead of nearly $7,000, she needed to find $2,040, still a significant sum, but achievable through careful planning and sacrifice. More importantly, the letter included her class schedule: Introduction to Typography on Tuesday evenings, Digital Fundamentals on Thursday evenings, and one Saturday morning workshop per month. She read the letter 3 times before allowing herself to believe it was real. For the first time since Dylan had derailed her Creative Edge interview, Jade felt genuine excitement about her future. This wasn't another application sent into the void or another hope pinned on external validation. This was concrete progress she could control and measure. The first step was reorganizing her work schedule at Sunrise Diner. Rita, who had always appreciated Jade's reliability, proved surprisingly accommodating when Jade explained her educational goals. "You're too smart to be slinging hash forever," Rita said, echoing her frequent refrain, but with new seriousness. "If you need Tuesday and Thursday evenings off, we can make it work, but I'll need you to cover some weekend breakfast shifts to balance the hours." The trade-off meant working 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays, brutal hours that would leave her exhausted, but the scheduling change preserved her Tuesday and Thursday evenings for classes while maintaining enough income to meet her financial obligations. The second step was more challenging: finding the money for tuition, books, and supplies. Jade spent a weekend cataloging everything she owned that had resale value. Her old gaming console, rarely used since high school, brought in $120 through Facebook Marketplace. A collection of designer handbags, impulse purchases from her early waitressing days when financial planning felt less urgent, sold for another $300. She took on additional freelance design work, accepting projects that previously seemed too small or poorly paid to justify the time investment. A local pizza shop needed new delivery flyers, a neighborhood dog walker wanted business cards, a friend's sister required a logo for her Etsy store selling handmade jewelry. Each project paid between $25 and $75, but they accumulated steadily while building her portfolio with real client work. The most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who owned the convenience store 2 blocks from the diner, approached Jade during a slow Tuesday afternoon. "I hear you do computer design work," Mrs. Chen said, settling into a corner booth with a cup of coffee. "My granddaughter says I need better signs for my store, maybe a website too. She says the young people don't like how my place looks." Jade had walked past Chen's Market hundreds of times, noting its dated signage and cluttered layout. The store served a steady stream of neighborhood customers, but its visual presentation suggested a business stuck in the 1990s. "I'd be happy to look at your current materials and suggest some improvements," Jade offered carefully. "Maybe we could start with new window signage and see how that works." Mrs. Chen's project became Jade's first substantial freelance contract. She redesigned the store's exterior signage, created eye-catching window displays advertising weekly specials, and developed a simple website with store hours and product highlights. The total payment was $800, enough to cover her first semester's book costs and software subscriptions. More importantly, the Chen's Market project gave Jade her first taste of client management and real-world problem-solving. Mrs. Chen had strong opinions about colors, like red is lucky but not too bright red, and insisted that certain information be prominently displayed. "People need to know we sell lottery tickets and money orders." Learning to balance client preferences with design principles challenged Jade in ways that YouTube tutorials never had. When her first community college class began in mid-October, Jade felt prepared in ways that extended beyond financial readiness. She'd proven to herself that she could balance work, education, and freelance projects. She'd demonstrated that her design skills had real market value. Most importantly, she'd started thinking of herself as a professional pursuing advancement, rather than a dreamer chasing fantasies. Professor Chen's typography class immediately elevated Jade's understanding of design fundamentals. She'd been working intuitively with fonts and layouts for years, but learning the historical development of typefaces and the psychological impact of different typographic choices transformed her approach to every project. Typography is the voice of your design, Professor Chen explained during the second week of classes. The same words can whisper or shout, feel friendly or intimidating, suggest luxury or economy, simply through font selection and spacing. Jade found herself analyzing every piece of text she encountered, restaurant menus, billboards, product packaging, with new awareness of the subtle messages conveyed through typographic choices. Her freelance work improved dramatically as she applied these insights to real projects. Ashley, the divorced mother she'd met during her first class visit, became a study partner and source of encouragement. They met at coffee shops between classes, reviewing assignments and sharing strategies for balancing education with demanding personal responsibilities. I told my ex-husband that Tuesday and Thursday nights are non-negotiable. He can take the kids those evenings or figure out childcare, but I'm not missing class for his convenience.
Ashley's determination inspired Jade to establish similar boundaries with her own family. When Dylan asked her to skip class to drive him to Phoenix for a gaming tournament, she declined without offering alternative solutions. When Carmen requested help with grocery shopping on a Thursday evening, Jade suggested they go together on Sunday instead. The small acts of prioritizing her education felt revolutionary. For years, Jade had automatically accommodated everyone else's needs, treating her own goals as flexible and secondary. Now she was learning to protect her time and energy for activities that directly supported her professional development. Her digital fundamentals class introduced software techniques that transformed her design capabilities. Professor Martinez, a freelance designer who worked with major Phoenix advertising agencies, taught advanced Photoshop and Illustrator techniques that made Jade's previous self-taught methods look primitive by comparison. Efficiency is just as important as creativity, Professor Martinez emphasized. A designer who takes 8 hours to complete a project that should take 3 hours won't survive in a professional environment, regardless of talent. Jade absorbed these lessons eagerly, practicing new techniques during every spare moment. Her laptop, previously adequate for basic design work, struggled with the complex files required for class assignments. She researched refurbished workstations and saved aggressively toward upgrading her equipment. The improvement in her work quality was immediately apparent. Mrs. Chen, thrilled with her store's new signage, referred Jade to 3 other local business owners. A neighborhood restaurant hired her to redesign their takeout menus. A small accounting firm requested new business cards and letterhead. A local realtor wanted yard signs that would stand out from competitors. Each project reinforced skills learned in class while providing income that supported her educational goals. Jade developed systems for managing client communications, tracking project timelines, and handling revisions professionally. She was building a real freelance practice, not just accepting occasional odd jobs. The most significant validation came during her first portfolio review in November. Professor Chen examined Jade's semester work alongside pieces from her pre-college portfolio, providing detailed feedback on her artistic and technical development. "Your improvement over the past 2 months is remarkable," Professor Chen said, comparing an early self-taught logo design with Jade's recent class project. "You're developing a sophisticated understanding of visual hierarchy and brand consistency. More importantly, you're learning to think like a professional designer, not just someone who knows how to use design software." The critique session lasted 45 minutes, covering strengths to leverage and areas requiring continued development. For the first time, Jade received professional-level feedback from someone qualified to assess her potential career prospects. "Have you considered internship opportunities?" Professor Chen asked as their session concluded. "Several local agencies work with our advanced students. You're not quite ready yet, but if you maintain this trajectory, you could be competitive for spring placements." Walking to her car after that meeting, Jade felt a profound shift in her self-perception. 6 months earlier, she'd been a waitress with design hobbies, dependent on family cooperation for basic transportation, and vulnerable to other people's thoughtless decisions. Now she was a student with improving technical skills, a growing client base, and faculty recognition of her professional potential. Dylan's theft of her car keys felt like the end of her dreams. Instead, it had forced her to build something more sustainable, expertise that belonged entirely to her, credentials that no one could diminish, and confidence based on demonstrated competence rather than external validation.
The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday in late November, jolting Jade awake just as she was finally drifting off after completing a particularly challenging typography assignment. Her mother's number flashed on her phone screen, which was unusual. Carmen never called during her casino shifts unless something was seriously wrong. "Mija, I need you to come to the hospital right away." Carmen's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "There's been an accident." Jade's blood turned to ice. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "It's Dylan. He was driving home from Sarah's place, and someone ran a red light. He's in surgery now. They said—" Carmen's voice broke. "They said it's bad, Jade. Really bad." The next several hours passed in a blur of harsh hospital lighting, uncomfortable waiting room chairs, and the constant background hum of medical equipment. Dylan had suffered severe internal injuries, a collapsed lung, and significant trauma to his left leg. The surgeon, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, explained that while Dylan would survive, his recovery would be lengthy and complicated. "He'll need multiple surgeries over the next few months," Dr. Patterson explained to Jade and Carmen in the family consultation room. "Physical therapy will be extensive. He's looking at least 6 months before he can walk normally again, possibly longer." The immediate crisis consumed everything. Jade spent the next 3 days essentially living at the hospital, sleeping in waiting room chairs and surviving on vending machine food and coffee. She missed both of her Tuesday and Thursday classes, sending apologetic emails to her professors, but unable to focus on anything beyond Dylan's condition. When Dylan finally regained consciousness on Friday afternoon, his first coherent words were about his streaming setup. "My computer," he mumbled through the pain medication haze. "Did anyone check on my equipment? I've got subscribers expecting content." Even in his hospital bed, hooked up to multiple IV lines and monitors, Dylan's primary concern was maintaining his online presence. Jade felt a complicated mixture of relief that he was alert enough to worry about mundane things, and frustration that his priorities seemed unchanged even by a near-death experience. The financial implications became clear over the weekend. Dylan had been earning approximately $800 per month through his streaming activities and occasional freelance video editing work. That income, while irregular, had helped cover household expenses and allowed him to contribute to groceries and utilities. With Dylan unable to work for months, that financial support would disappear entirely. Worse, Carmen would need to reduce her casino shifts to help with Dylan's care during his initial recovery. The family's total income would drop by nearly 40% just as medical expenses and therapy costs began accumulating. "His insurance will cover the hospital stay and surgeries," Carmen explained to Jade during one of their whispered conversations in the hospital cafeteria. "But the physical therapy, the modifications we'll need to make to the house, the lost income while I'm taking care of him, I don't know how we're going to manage." The unspoken expectation hung heavy in the air between them. Jade was the stable one, the family member with reliable income and flexible schedule. As Dylan's recovery progressed, more and more responsibility would inevitably fall on her shoulders. The first sacrifice came immediately. Rita, sympathetic to Jade's family crisis, offered additional shifts to help compensate for their financial strain. "You can pick up Dylan's old dishwashing shifts," she suggested. "It's not glamorous work, but it's extra money when you need it most." Jade found herself working 12-hour days, her regular serving shifts, plus evening dishwashing duties that left her exhausted and covered in grease. The extra income helped, but the extended hours meant missing study time and arriving late to classes when she could attend at all. Professor Chen noticed her declining performance during the 3rd week of Dylan's hospitalization. "Jade, could you stay after class for a moment?"
she asked following a particularly difficult typography critique where Jade's assignment had been rushed and poorly executed. I know you're dealing with family issues, Professor Chen said gently, but your work quality has dropped significantly, and you've missed several key assignments. I'm concerned about your ability to complete the semester successfully. The conversation that followed was devastating. Professor Chen explained that Jade was currently failing 2 of her courses due to missed assignments and poor performance on recent projects. To maintain her financial aid eligibility, she needed to achieve passing grades in all her classes. I understand that family emergencies require sacrifices, but if you can't dedicate sufficient time to your studies, you might want to consider taking a leave of absence and returning when your situation stabilizes. Taking a leave of absence meant losing her financial aid package and starting over the following year, if she could afford to return at all. But continuing with her current trajectory meant almost certain failure, and the loss of aid anyway, plus the additional burden of student loan debt with no credentials to show for it.
That evening, Jade sat in her Honda Civic in the hospital parking lot, engine running but going nowhere. Inside the building, Dylan was beginning his long rehabilitation process, learning to use a walker and complaining about the physical therapy exercises that would determine whether he'd regain full mobility. Carmen was beside his bed, reading him messages from his online followers who were concerned about his absence from streaming. The irony was brutal. 6 months earlier, Dylan had casually destroyed her chance at a dream job by taking her car without permission. Now his recovery was systematically dismantling the alternative paths she'd built through determination and sacrifice. The family crisis demanded her full attention and financial contribution, making it impossible to maintain the delicate balance of work, education, and freelance projects that had been carrying her toward professional independence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ashley, her study partner from community college. Missed you in class again tonight. Prof. Martinez announced the spring internship applications are due next week. Are you planning to apply? The spring internships represented everything Jade had been working toward. Professor Chen had specifically mentioned her potential eligibility just weeks earlier. The placement would provide real agency experience, professional mentorship, and connections that could lead to full-time employment after graduation. But internships required consistent class attendance, strong academic performance, and the ability to work unpaid hours while maintaining other income sources. None of those requirements seemed achievable with Dylan's care needs and the family's financial crisis. Jade typed and deleted several responses to Ashley's text. How could she explain that her brother's accident had effectively ended her educational progress? How could she admit that her family's needs would always supersede her personal ambitions? How could she acknowledge that she was trapped in the same cycle of sacrifice and deferred dreams that had defined her life before she discovered the courage to pursue formal education? The worst part wasn't even the immediate crisis. It was the growing realization that this pattern would likely repeat throughout her life. Every time she built momentum toward independence, family emergencies would pull her back into the role of caretaker and financial stabilizer. Dylan's accident was genuine and serious, but the underlying dynamic was familiar. Jade's dreams were expendable when family needs arose. She called Professor Chen the next morning and officially withdrew from her classes, citing family medical emergency as the reason. The conversation was brief and professional, but Jade could hear the disappointment in her instructor's voice. "You're welcome to reapply for next year's program," Professor Chen said. "Your portfolio shows real promise, and we'd be happy to consider you again when your circumstances allow." But Jade knew that next year was a fantasy. Dylan's recovery would take months, possibly extending into the following year. The family's financial strain would require her continued full-time work at the diner, plus additional shifts. Her freelance clients, already neglected due to hospital visits and extended work hours, were beginning to look elsewhere for design services. By the time Dylan recovered enough to resume contributing to household expenses, Jade would be 25, further removed from the energy and optimism that had carried her through her first semester. The momentum she'd built, The professional relationships, the technical skills, the growing confidence would dissipate like smoke. Standing in the hospital elevator on her way to visit Dylan for what felt like the 100th time, Jade understood that she was experiencing more than a temporary setback. This was the moment when her life path definitively diverged from her dreams, when family obligation permanently superseded personal ambition. Everything she'd worked for was slipping away, and there seemed to be nothing she could do to stop it.
2 months into Dylan's recovery, Jade found herself standing outside the Westside Community College Design Lab at 6:30 p.m. on a Thursday evening. She wasn't enrolled anymore, had no right to be there, but something had drawn her to the place where her dreams had briefly felt achievable. Through the windows, she could see her former classmates working on their spring semester projects, their faces illuminated by the glow of high-end monitors displaying sophisticated design work. Ashley spotted her through the glass and came outside during the break, her expression mixing surprise with concern. "Jade, I've been wondering how you're doing. How's your brother?" "Getting better," Jade replied, though the words felt hollow. "Still has a long way to go with physical therapy, but he's walking with a cane now." "That's good news. Are you planning to come back next semester? Professor Chen asks about you sometimes." Jade shook her head, unable to voice the growing certainty that her educational plans were permanently derailed. "Family situation is still too complicated. I'm working full-time at the diner, plus picking up extra shifts to help with medical bills." Ashley studied her face with the careful attention of someone who recognized defeat when she saw it. "You know, something interesting happened in class tonight. Professor Martinez mentioned a design competition that might interest you. The Phoenix Small Business Association is looking for a new visual identity. Logo, website design, marketing materials. First prize is $5,000 and a year-long contract with their member businesses." "I'm not in school anymore," Jade said quietly. "I can't compete in student competitions." "It's not a student competition. It's open to all Arizona designers. The deadline is 6 weeks away." Ashley pulled out her phone and showed Jade the competition details. "Look, I know your situation is tough, but you're too talented to just give up. This could be exactly the kind of opportunity you need." That night, Jade sat in her Honda Civic outside Dylan's physical therapy appointment, scrolling through the competition requirements on her phone. The Phoenix Small Business Association represented over 200 local companies, restaurants, retail stores, service providers, and professional firms. They needed a complete rebrand that would appeal to diverse businesses while conveying professionalism and community connection. The scope was massive, far beyond anything she'd attempted before. But something about the challenge sparked the first genuine excitement she'd felt since withdrawing from college. This wasn't about academic grades or professor approval. This was about solving real problems for real businesses, exactly the kind of work she'd always dreamed of doing. Over the next week, Jade began researching small businesses across Phoenix, studying their current branding and identifying common challenges. She visited dozens of locations during her breaks from the diner, photographing storefronts and observing how customers interacted with different visual environments. The project became an obsession that consumed every spare moment. The breakthrough came during an unlikely conversation with Mrs. Chen, whose convenience store had been Jade's first major freelance success. Mrs. Chen had called requesting updates to her seasonal promotional materials, and their discussion gradually expanded into broader observations about local business challenges. "You know what I notice?" Mrs. Chen said, settling into her usual corner booth at Sunrise Diner. "All these small businesses, we try to look like big corporations. Same fonts, same colors, same boring designs. But what makes us special is that we're part of the neighborhood. We know our customers' names, we care about local events, we support the community in ways big companies never will." The comment crystallized Jade's entire approach to the competition. Instead of creating a corporate-style brand that could work for any business association anywhere, she would design an identity that celebrated the unique character of Phoenix's small business community. She spent the next 3 weeks developing a concept called Desert Roots,
a visual system that incorporated subtle references to Arizona's landscape while emphasizing personal connections and community involvement. The logo featured a stylized saguaro cactus, whose branches formed interconnected shapes representing different types of businesses. The color palette drew from desert sunsets and local stone formations. The typography balanced professional readability with warm, approachable personality. But the real innovation was in her proposed implementation strategy. Rather than creating a single static logo, Jade designed a flexible system that allowed individual businesses to customize elements while maintaining overall brand consistency. A restaurant could emphasize the hospitality aspects, while a construction company could highlight the strength and reliability components. Working on the project revealed how much she'd learned during her brief semester at community college. Professor Chen's typography lessons influenced every font choice. Professor Martinez's emphasis on systematic thinking shaped her approach to creating scalable design solutions. Even the client management skills she'd developed through her freelance work informed her presentation strategy.
The competition deadline arrived on a Friday. Jade submitted her entry at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the portal closed. After spending the entire day refining her presentation boards and double-checking every detail. The submission included 43 pages of design work, logos, business cards, website mock-ups, signage examples, and detailed implementation guidelines. For the first time in months, Jade felt proud of something she'd accomplished. Win or lose, the Desert Roots project represented her best work, a sophisticated solution that demonstrated both technical skill and creative vision. She'd proven to herself that her design abilities had continued developing even outside formal educational settings. The waiting period stretched for 3 weeks. Jade tried not to think about the competition, but found herself daydreaming about what $5,000 could mean for her family's financial situation and her own educational future. The money could cover Dylan's remaining therapy costs and give her the breathing room to return to college without the crushing pressure of supporting the entire household. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, while Jade was serving the lunch rush at Sunrise Diner. She recognized the number from the Phoenix Small Business Association website and stepped outside to answer, her heart hammering against her ribs. Miss Martinez, this is Janet Williams from the Phoenix Small Business Association. I'm calling with some exciting news about our design competition. Jade held her breath. Your Desert Roots concept has been selected as our winner. The judging panel was unanimous. They felt your design perfectly captured what we were looking for. The system you created is exactly what our member businesses need. The words felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. Jade found herself sitting down hard on the curb outside the diner, legs suddenly unsteady. The $5,000 prize will be distributed in 2 payments, $2,500 now, and $2,500 after you complete the implementation guidelines for our member businesses. We're also excited to discuss the ongoing contract opportunities we mentioned in the competition details. When Jade finally hung up, she sat on the curb for several minutes, watching traffic pass on the street that had defined the boundaries of her working life for the past 2 years. Everything looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just a waitress with design hobbies anymore. She wasn't even a former student who dropped out due to family circumstances. She was a professional designer who just won a major competition against established agencies and experienced freelancers. That evening, she drove to the hospital where Dylan was completing an outpatient therapy session. Instead of the usual mixture of resentment and obligation she felt during these visits, Jade experienced something like gratitude. Dylan's accident had forced her to withdraw from college, but it had also led her to discover opportunities she might never have pursued while safely enrolled in structured classes. I have some news, she told Dylan and Carmen as they gathered in the hospital cafeteria. I entered a design competition for the Phoenix Small Business Association, and I won. The conversation that followed was unlike any they'd had since the accident. For the first time, Carmen and Dylan seemed to fully grasp that Jade's design work wasn't a hobby or side interest. It was a legitimate career path that could generate substantial income and professional recognition. $5,000? Carmen repeated, clearly struggling to process the amount. From design work? Plus ongoing contract opportunities with over 200 local businesses. This could be the beginning of a real freelance practice. Dylan, still moving carefully with his cane, looked genuinely impressed. That's actually really incredible, Jade. I had no idea your design stuff was this serious. For the first time since his accident, Jade saw her brother as something other than a burden on her dreams. His recovery had cost her formal education, but it had also pushed her toward a path she might never have discovered otherwise. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs came not from following predetermined plans, but from finding new possibilities within existing constraints. She was still a waitress supporting her family, still facing financial challenges, and uncertain about her educational future. But she was also a competition-winning designer with growing professional credibility and expanding opportunities. The breakthrough hadn't come from escaping her circumstances. It had come from learning to excel within them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.